Hi guys, welcome to a new video. So today I thought I'd get on to the next video that I wrote a list down for just randomly a few days ago. I did say in the last video, if you watched that, which was the best things about each zodiac sign in my opinion. I did also mention briefly at the end of that video, towards the end of it, that I also made a list at the same time randomly for the worst things about each sign in my opinion as well, and that I would do a video on that the next day. It's been 2 days. For some reason. I just didn't get around to it yesterday, but I'm doing it today. So, as you can tell by the title, this one is the opposite to the last video I did. So it's just a rough list that I randomly came out with about my opinions of the worst things about each sign. So I'll deliver this video in the same style as I did in the last video with the best things about each sign, but it will just be what I think personally are the worst things about each sign. Of course, this is just like a generalization, it's not overly specific, and it's not meant to be offensive to anyone who is each sign, obviously. It's just my opinion, it's a broad overview of the traits of each sign, and the ones that I like the least in terms of the traits of each sign. Generic traits, not specific to each person. Anyways then, so let's get into it. So, Aries, the worst traits for Aries in my opinion, they are so selfish, and this video might be longer, I'm just going to say, than the last video about the best things, because I was kind of speaking to like further explain my opinion on each trait as to why I wrote that specific trait down in the last video, but I think I'll be doing that more in this video because since they're bad traits, I just naturally think it requires a bit more explanation as to why I think that. So I'll be doing that more in this video, so it will be a bit longer probably, just a heads up. But yeah, so they are so selfish. What I mean by that is that they do have the sun exalted in their sign. So they do strengthen the sun, but it is kind of the planet of the ego. It's kind of the planet of, obviously, every planet in the solar system revolves around the sun. So it is kind of this ideology of they are the center of the universe and everything revolves around them. Typical manifestation of this, as far as the sign goes, would be obviously the sign of Leo, because Leo is the sign where the sign that is ruled by the sun, but Aries strengthens the sun. So they are debatably, they're even more selfish than Leo in a certain sense. That is up for debate. They're both pretty selfish. Of course, this is just a generalization, as I said at the start, as I prefaced at the start. But basically, if you're an unevolved version of an Aries, because the sun is so exalted, you do kind of have this high self-confidence. If you're an unevolved version of an Aries, you could display this trait of selfishness, where you do kind of think your opinions and your wants and needs are most important, and you'll just go after them. Next negative trait I wrote for Aries, possessive. Now, this is one that's maybe a little less well known than other Aries negative traits, but most people would put possessive as like a Taurus or Scorpio major weakness, but I think it's present in Aries too. When Aries does get attached to a partner, because they also can be selfish, they also sort of want to keep their partner all to themselves. And if the partner is sort of, casually, even just casually speaking to a member of the opposite sex, just like as a friend, or if they're doing some harmless flirting with someone of the opposite sex, they will be very possessive over their partner. So that's why I wrote that, is that they can also be jealous very easily. Like if they are a male Aries and they're dating a girl and the girl is, even in a harmless way, sort of flirting with another guy, the Aries will not be happy about that situation, so they're possessive in that sense. I wrote down then possessive and also confrontational, aggressive, and impatient. Aries, I think most people know that an unevolved Aries is pretty confrontational. They will pick fights out of nowhere, like you'll say the smallest thing that could possibly be taken in the wrong way or in an offensive way, and they will take it that wrong way, that offensive way, and they'll get confrontational and defensive about it, and they'll start a confrontation. They're aggressive because of Mars being the ruler of their sign, and they are also impatient. Very impatient. My Mars is Aries in my chart, and I can say I'm very impatient. Not necessarily for people, but there's just the little small things really make me impatient. So I can vouch personally for that fact that Aries is very impatient, especially when they're less evolved. So Taurus. Now, the biggest one that I think everyone will agree with for a negative trait, a weakness of Taurus, stubborn, that's the main one, and materialistic. An unevolved Taurus, they are very stubborn. One, because they're the fixed mode, and all the fixed signs don't really change easily, so they're all stubborn. But they're also Earth, so fixed, and then Earth, which is already the least adaptable element on its own. Yeah, that adds up to them being very stubborn and materialistic. Again, because they're the fixed Earth sign, they care a lot about money, financial gain. Too slow, I wrote down. Taurus can be quite slow moving. Bit boring, I wrote down. Now, that's obviously an overgeneralization. Not every Taurus is boring. I'm not by any means saying that, obviously. But they can be, especially when they're just wrapped up too much of work, they don't always let themselves loose to have as much fun as they should. Close-minded. Now, that's, I guess, similar to stubborn. It's like, they're not very adaptable to other people's opinions and viewpoints if they differ too much from their personal opinions and viewpoints on a specific topic or, situation. They're not very open-minded at all. And then also lazy. They can be lazy, especially when they're less evolved. Gemini. Change too often is the first one that I wrote down for Gemini. And yeah, I mean, that kind of speaks for itself. Gemini does change too often. They are too adaptable, and whilst obviously one side of that is a positive in that they are very adaptable, they can easily roll with the punches of what life throws at them. The negative side of that is that they have a lack of consistency and a lack of reliability because of that. They like gossiping. I would say Gemini does like gossiping when they're an unevolved version. Not very reliable. That feeds into the changing too often because of the mutable characteristic they have. They have commitment issues as well. And again, that also is a similar sort of source as well to the commitment issues thing, is that they change too often. Because they're a mutable mode sign, they aren't scared of change. So as soon as the relationship gets not satisfying for them, they're changeable enough to disregard the entire relationship quickly if they're not satisfied by it, because they don't find it hard to make big changes. It's just on a whim. So commitment issues can be two-faced with people, and I think most people give Gemini a bad reputation by saying they're two-faced. I personally, in my life, most of the Geminis I know, and I do know a lot of Geminis, most of the Geminis I know are actually not two-faced at all. Most of the Geminis I know are actually really reliable and dependable. But the stereotype is somewhat true that some of them, especially when they're less mature, they can be two-faced with people. And that ties in also kind of again to the fact that they can gossip behind your back. Cancer, too clingy. That is probably a big one people would say about Cancer. They are too clingy and they mollycoddle you. They treat everyone like they're children. And yeah, they're too clingy. They're a bit they don't let you have fun because they're too busy kind of restricting you. But they do it because they don't want you to get hurt. They want to protect you. They want you to be happy, not get upset, protect your feelings because they're so considerate. But because of that, they can stifle your fun and your creativity and anything else because they can be too overly cautious. So too clingy, boring, lazy, possessive in the sense that, they're too worried that you'll get hurt or that something bad will happen to you, so they kind of wrap you in cotton wool and mollycoddle you. Never let you have fun. That was what I was just explaining. Most judgmental water sign. Now this is quite a controversial one. Probably some of you will not agree with me about this, but I'm not by any means saying Cancer is too judgmental, but compared to the Scorpio and the Pisces, I think they're more judgmental than the Scorpio and the Pisces, because they're quite grounded. Like, their opposite sign is Capricorn, so they're kind of on the opposite side of the same coin, which is kind of how I like to think of all the oppositions in the zodiac. They're kind of opposite sides of the same coin. So Cancer does have this side to them which is quite traditional and grounded, in a more similar way to Capricorn's character traits, and that does make them kind of a bit more judgmental. Leo then. So the first one that obviously everyone gives Leo a bad reputation for, selfish. Now, I don't actually know that many Leos. The ones I do know actually are not that selfish at all, or at least they don't appear to be. But there is still some truth to that stereotype. They are ruled by the sun. I argue that Aries can actually be more selfish than Leo, believe it or not, because they actually exalt the sun, but they're both selfish. Stubborn. Now, they are a fixed sign, so again, they can be stubborn. Leo is also lazy. Now, for a fire sign, Leo is lazy, know-it-all, entitled, want loads of attention, but as soon as they don't get treated like the best, like a king or a queen, they accuse you of not liking them at all. And this does happen. They are kind of a know-it-all, they're entitled, and they think that they know everything. And even if you prove to them with solid evidence that you know the situation better than they do, they won't admit that you knew the situation better than them. They'll just kind of change the topic because they don't like to think like they don't know things. They want to kind of prove you wrong. They're almost like, they think that they know every situation, like they have more knowledge about it than you do. And then if they don't, and it's proven to them that they don't like that. They do want loads of attention. And yeah, I mean, as soon as they don't get treated like the king or the queen, they accuse you of not liking them at all. And that is true. I mean, they're very warm-hearted, very generous, as I said in the video about the best things about each sign. Leo, in my opinion, I do still think they're one of the nicest signs most of the time when they're in a good mood. You know, the body part associated with Leo is the heart, so that tells you what you need to know, really. They're very generous, warm, affectionate, very affectionate. The thing is, they're affectionate if you're the same back, but Leo is quite high maintenance. As soon as you detach from them a little bit, and you don't like give them 1,000 compliments a day, they do it to you, so they expect it back, but they expect it back more than they give to you. But the worst thing about it is that as soon as you don't give them 1,000 compliments a day, they think that you don't like them at all. Again, just a generalization, of course not every Leo is like that. Some actually can be surprisingly humble and grounded, but that's a less mature version of a Leo. Virgo, way too critical. I think this is what Virgo gets the most slack for, in most people's opinion. Way too critical, uptight, close-minded. Now, they're not as close-minded as the Taurus and the Capricorn, the other two Earth signs, because they are the mutable mode for Earth, so they are a bit more adaptable. But Earth is still quite a close-minded element because they're quite traditional. Judgmental, they never let you have fun, and they can be emotionally cold, in my opinion. Because they're ruled by Mercury, they're quite a logical, intellectual sign. They do disregard emotions for the most part. Libra, lazy, too concerned about making everyone happy at their own expense. I think most people think that is the worst part of the Libra. And that is actually true. That stereotype does hold some truth. They're such a nice, friendly sign, but the negative side of that is that they are so concerned about making everyone else happy that they do kind of sacrifice themselves and their own happiness in order to make other people happy. So yeah, I do agree with that for the most part. Too concerned about making everyone happy at their own expense. Indecisive, definitely. Too passive, bit boring, lie to keep the peace. Libra can bend the truth in order to keep the peace and, you know, avoid rocking the boat. Scorpio. Now, the biggest ones here are the first three, I think, that I've written down. Jealous, possessive, and hold grudges. Now, obviously these are stereotypes of Scorpio, but they do have some truth to them. They are very jealous in relationships, they are possessive, and they do hold grudges if you wrong them in any way. Too secretive, that is true. Never open up, but then expect you to tell them everything. That is also very true. This is just also from experience that I've had. It's like they, because they're a water sign, they're into these deep emotional conversations, so they don't shy away from them, really. I mean, the moon does fall in their sign, but they don't necessarily shy away from them because they are still a water sign, and they're fixed water too. Another one which I didn't write, but that I probably should have done, is that also stubborn as well because of the fixed mode. But because they are still water and they're fixed water, they don't shy away from these deep conversations, but they kind of want to know every little secret, deepest, darkest secret that you have, but then they don't let you into their deepest, darkest secrets. So they expect you to open up and you know, pour your heart out to them, but then when you want it back from their side, they do not give you it, as a general rule. Sagittarius. I like Sagittarius, so it's actually quite hard to find negative traits for them, but I did find a few. Commitment issues. I think this is the worst one, similar to their opposite Gemini. Commitment issues. They don't like to be tied down. They're very freedom loving, and they don't like possessive and jealous partners for that reason. They don't like clinginess. So that equals definitely commitment issues. They are not stable or reliable. Now, this is because they're the mutable mode as well for fire. So they're not stable, they're not reliable, you can't really depend on them. And again, this feeds into their commitment issues as well. And rude. I wrote down rude. Now, I want to preface this quite a lot. Sagittarius is, again, as I said in the best things about each sign video I posted 2 days ago, Sagittarius is another one of those signs which, generally speaking, they are one of the nicest signs of the zodiac. Again, they're fire, and fire is warm-hearted in general. So, similar to Leo, Sagittarius is very affectionate and nice people. The thing is, they are very blunt with their language. I think that's a stereotype that a lot of people think, but it does have some truth to it. They're very blunt with their communication. They don't sugarcoat anything. They can come off as harsh or tactless with what they say, and it comes off as rude, to be honest. It can come off as rude. Sometimes I personally actually like that about the Sagittarius, because at least they're honest, but they're brutally honest to the point where it comes off as quite tactless and insensitive and rude at times. And sometimes, because I'm Cancer and Pisces in prominent positions, I've got a lot of water, I am emotional, and sometimes one thing that Sagittarius will say to me, I will be offended by for quite a long period of time after they've said it. And I know that they never mean to be rude with what they're saying, they're just being honest. But there has been a few things that Sagittarius has said to me that has offended me for quite a long time after. But then they don't really care that they've offended you either, because they don't mean to offend you. Whilst they don't mean to offend you, they also don't necessarily care much if they do, so they don't really apologise for it because they don't see they did anything wrong. They just see it as being honest. And also, yeah, they're a bit changeable. You can't really rely on them for a long-term relationship necessarily. They do disregard the entire relationship quickly as soon as they're not satisfied, like all the mutable signs. So, yeah, that's that. They are flighty as well. Capricorn. Now, Capricorn, bossy, judgmental, miserable, and like to make everyone else miserable too. They care about work more than family and friends, and they are emotionally cold. Now, pretty true about Capricorn, and I can say this also because my moon sign is Capricorn in my chart. So I don't know, I feel like it means that I know Capricorn a bit better than some other signs might that don't have strong Capricorn energy in their personal chart. Especially Sun Capricorn, they are very bossy. They can be judgmental, not necessarily as bad as Virgo in that way, but they can be. Miserable is definitely the biggest thing about Capricorn, because they're ruled by Saturn, which is like the depressive planet. They can be miserable. And they do like to make everyone else miserable too sometimes. Like if they're having a bad day and they feel miserable, it's like you can't be happy in front of them if they're not happy too. Like if they're happy and you're happy in front of them, that's fine. But if they've had a bad day, they're stressed out and they're feeling miserable, you kind of need to be miserable too. If you're happy in front of them, but they're miserable, they kind of need to drag you down until you're miserable too. They kill the vibe of the room, like all the positive vibes, or you know, like the happiness in a room. If Capricorn walks into that room and they're in a bad mood, they will suck out the atmosphere until everyone else in the room is as miserable as the Capricorn is. Again, just a generalization, but they do that. They can be emotionally cold because they can be pretty disconnected from their own emotions, and they do generally care about work more than family and friends. Aquarius, okay. Emotionally cold, commitment issues, despite the fact that they're a fixed air sign, they do still like freedom and emotional detachment to the point that they do still kind of struggle to commit. Rebellious for the sake of it, even when there's no reason to be. Now that is true. I mean, I do think that's true. Because with Aquarius, they've got Uranus as their major ruler, so it's like they want to defy Saturn and all the rules and regulations of the society and all these expectations of society. which makes them rebellious. But sometimes if there's a good reason to be rebellious, it's a good thing. My Venus in my chart is an Aquarius, so I sometimes get these rebellious urges, but it's like sometimes they don't need to be rebellious for any good reason, but they insist on being so anyway. Like they will defy authority for no good reason. Like they've been given a perfectly reasonable request, like, could you please do this? And sometimes they'll just be like, no, I don't want to do this, for no reason. I mean, it's a good thing when there's a reason behind it or a purpose behind it, which, because they're also co-ruled by Saturn, they're quite serious and realistic. So normally there is a good reason behind Aquarius's rebel urges, but sometimes there isn't, and on those occasions, it's just like they're just being stubborn and rebellious for the sake of it, for no reason. Know-it-all. Now, this is interesting because their ego is somewhat weakened because the sun's, like, debilitated in their sign, detrimented, and obviously they're opposite to Leo, so you'd think they'd actually not have an ego at all. But they can still be a know-it-all because they are very logical and intellectual, so they kind of think that they know things really well. Again, because Leo's their opposite, again, Leo Aquarius, again, they're kind of opposite sides of the same coin. That's how I'd like to think now of all the oppositions in the zodiac. Obviously, they are very different, but they also share some similarities. Both Leo and Aquarius, they're both know-it-alls. They can both be know-it-alls. And also Aquarius never seem to care about anything. And now this is a direct opposition to Leo, in that Leo seems to be very affectionate, like they're very friendly, bubbly. Aquarius is so detached, like on a personal level with individual people, that they don't seem to care about anything sometimes. I mean, they are chill, which is a good thing, but sometimes they just don't care enough about anything, which is quite frustrating. Pisces, too dreamy. I can vouch for this. I am a Pisces Sun and Mercury. Yeah, we're too dreamy. We are very unrealistic. Yeah, so here we go. Too dreamy and unrealistic, lazy, prone to addictions, overly emotional, escapist, and gullible. Now, I think these are quite sort of, what do you call it? They're quite like, these are kind of the traits that everyone gives Pisces, you know, a bad name for. Pisces always get some flack for these negative traits, but they are like a stereotype. But honestly, they are quite true. I mean, if you have like an air sign or definitely an earth sign as your moon, then it kind of makes the Pisces sun less like this, less dreamy and gullible and unrealistic. I mean, I'm not as dreamy as other Pisces that I know, because I think my moon in Capricorn being an earth sign, it kind of does make me a bit more in the real world, which I'm thankful for, otherwise I would be too dreamy. But obviously I'm still Sun and Mercury Pisces, so my ego and the way I think are both in Pisces, so I am still affected by this Pisces dreaminess. I am. Sometimes I'm very, very dreamy and unrealistic and gullible, but maybe not so much as Pisces that had like a water or a fire moon. But yeah, there is a certain degree of laziness, gullible, too dreamy and unrealistic sort of things to all Pisces. That is a theme that all Pisces kind of have. The extent to which they have that depends on the specific Pisces, but yeah, they all kind of have that theme. They all are quite lazy. They like to sleep a lot. Prone to addictions, that's very much a stereotype. It's kind of true, to be honest. They can be prone to addictions because they're escapist. It kind of feeds into the escapism. Overly emotional, they are way too overly sensitive, very similar to Cancer in that way. Although Cancer, I feel they're more emotional, but they're also more realistic. Whereas Pisces, they're less emotionally reactive than Cancer, but they're also more unrealistic, so it takes them longer to kind of realise that their emotions actually not true. Like a Cancer, for example, they might be the quickest one to be offended by something you've said to them, but they'll also kind of see that their emotion is, what do you call it, immature or blown out of proportion, because they're also grounded, because their opposite sign is Capricorn. So Cancer will be more reactive emotionally, so they're kind of like, you'll say something as a joke, they'll be taking offence to it, but then they'll kind of go into their shell, they'll think about it, and then eventually they'll be like, okay, I kind of overreacted emotionally to that situation, they didn't mean it the way that it came across. Pisces, they take longer to get upset initially by what you've said, but once they do, because they're less realistic, they kind of take longer to realise that they was irrational in their emotional reaction. And then, yeah, also escapist and gullible. It's easy to manipulate a Pisces. It's easy to get them to fall for pranks, tricks, all these things. So, yeah, basically, that is that video, guys. I'm going to try, hopefully, and do a collaboration for the next video with one of my closest friends. We'll see if we can make that happen. But thank you for listening, and I'll see you next time.